Ammar, early one here, late one for you, but we've got the Australian Grand Prix in the bag. How was it for you? Are you super excited about Ferrari yet again, not realising that when the rain comes
Ah,
down, you should probably be on wet tyres?
death, taxes, and Ferrari screwing up a rainy day type of condition is unbeaten. It always happens. So, welcome to 2025, Amar, and welcome to 2025, Lewis Hamilton. What can we say? This is about to be expected. You know what, Chez? Actually, I'm going to look at it positively, right? Okay, it was the first race. Wacky conditions. Yeah, I mean, you had Alex Albon coming P4, so we're just gonna get it out of our system. This was like this our season hasn't started yet. We're gonna wake up next week.
Oof, and I thought Saturday was bad. Right. Before we just launch into a giant Ferrari tirade, let's go through some of the other bits and pieces. So I picked out a couple of things that I thought were fun to talk about. The first is Lando bloody Norris. The man can drive, and the man can drive under
Hey,
pressure. He
hey,
finally did it.
hey, hey,
What do you have to
yes.
say about that?
Well, actually, I should be asking you this question and some of our fellow colleagues in the space, if you will. I've heard all kinds of things about him last year, saying he bottled it and whatever, Lando Norris and no wins and blah 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 blah. And you know what, Ches? We can talk about everything across the grid, but I think today was Lando Norris's day, and he has officially announced himself as the guy in charge for this championship. Now, you say whatever you want, and Max was really out there too, but Lando went through what was it, two restarts, three restarts? How do you want to look at it? I mean, even at one point he was going to follow the safety car off track, but and he didn't do that. He couldn't have done that, but whatever. I mean, he did a mega job of keeping his head, using his car to the best of his advantage. Yes, it's a dominant car, but most champions have dominant cars too. So there's nothing that you can take away from him. Every start, every restart, he nailed it. And this was a boring race in some ways from his perspective, but he did a really good job. Really good job.
Yes, I felt like this was catharsis for McLaren in a number of ways, actually. There were a lot of mistakes that had happened last season, both team and driver, that seemed to be corrected in this one race. Lando even referenced that in the post race interview, didn't he? That um, we'd made a bunch of mistakes and we corrected them all here. Aborted start, check. Uh, Dodgy conditions, tyre choices needing to be made, check. Uh, Responding under pressure to a faster driver right at the end, towards the end, check. Well, all of the stuff that we said that McLaren and Lando actually needed to get right, they did get right. So yeah, pretty good. What did you think about Oscar?
Yeah, so this is perfect, no? And I think that look, you and I know a couple of people that are diehard Oscar fans, and I have to say, I would love to kind of poop all over him, but to be honest, that was slightly unfair because the fashion in which he effectively went from P2 to whatever it was, P13, 14 at that point, you really can't blame him. The conditions were just really bad for that split second, and both McLarens were potentially out of it. Like I didn't even think that Lando was going to come back and win the race. It looked unbelievable. It really was. And it looked like this was going to be another Max masterclass, right, from Brazil 2024. But look, um, Piastri was unlucky in terms of the end result, but he's clearly a step behind Lando, and I think that's been proven throughout this weekend. And there's still 23 races to go, so nothing's to be lost yet. But it just I feel really bad for him, to be honest with you. I wouldn't have, it's his home race. I wouldn't have wanted him to go out like that. I
Yeah,
just wouldn't.
I mean, I think proven's probably a bit too harsh. Like there's still 23 races to come.
That's how I said, yeah, yeah.
But there was, yeah. I mean, he was a little bit behind in qualifying, wasn't he? I think the incident that essentially put him to the back of the grid, that could happen to either of them. Like Lando was like an inch away from the same thing happening to him, and it was
Yeah.
just the position that Oscar found himself in meant that he was having to battle Max, as well as trying to control his car coming back onto the circuit, where Lando just had to go, oh my god. And don't forget that actually earlier on in the race, coming out of turn 6, he dipped his wheel into the gravel,
Yeah, pretty much
and
everyone
managed
did.
to
Yeah.
save it. So I don't know. I feel bad for the kid. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't. It was just, it was a bit unlucky, and but again, it came down to just having that slight edge in qualifying. That's what Lando was allowed, and that's what paid off for him ultimately on Sunday.
Shez,
Um,
we
yeah,
criticize Lando a lot for losing his position at the start of the race, but actually Oscar lost his place to Max at the beginning. I know it feels like eons ago because a lot happened, but he did in fact lose that place to Max, and Lando did everything right on the start, and true to his word, he came back in here. But look, we're not screaming and crying about Oscar bottling it too, right? But he has been, I would say, a couple steps behind Lando throughout the weekend. Of course, the end result is shameful, and I feel really bad for him, as do you do too. But yeah, man, Shez, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, riding on this high of what Lando has done this weekend, and say I'm gonna call it. Lando is McLaren's number one driver. That's it. That's it. It's done.
oof. There you go. You heard it here first. I don't think I'm quite ready to throw in the towel for Oscar Piastri just yet. Here's hoping I'm right. Otherwise, it could get a bit one-sided. Um, and look, the reason I say that is because the second point to this is that McLaren looks
Oof.
pretty rapid,
Yeah.
doesn't it? I mean, there was a period in the middle of that race where it was not a very interesting race. The first two were within a second of each other, and that's where I thought Oscar was really going to hammer it home because he was within the DRS, really pushing, and I thought, okay, it's on, but behind them, Max was 15
Yeah.
seconds behind,
More than. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
right, and it was
Yep.
it was getting a little bit processional. Um, and then a couple of things happened. Fernando Alonso decided to put it in
Save
the
the
wall.
day.
Right, right. Don't tell me that Fernando isn't at least somewhere in the discussion for driver of the day, because otherwise it would have been an awful race. Um, that and the fact that there was an extra bit of rain, and
Oh,
a couple of people I thought had some shockers. And before I come to the elephant that we've already discussed in the room, I just want to say, David Croft, seriously, mate, when was
what
the
happened?
last time you watched a Formula One race, man? Like, he was out there saying, "Oh yeah, Ferrari, great idea. Stay on the slicks. In fact, they should stay out there for longer while the rain comes down and everybody's falling off the track." And not to mention the fact that when the race restarts again, even if it is drier than it was when the rain was coming down, they're still going to have to warm those tyres up and fall back anyway. Did he just not understand? And the fact that Ted Kravitz then came in and decided to back him up as well with that, yeah, Crofty, yeah, I have to agree with you. I think Ferrari have really thrown this one away. They should have stayed out on the slicks. Come on, were we watching the same race, Ammar?
Yes, this is well, thank you for finally coming to my side of this whole thing. And I've told you time and time and again, that when it is oh man, yes. So by the way, I didn't hear any of that in real time, but I did watch a clip of it on social media somehow. And I think there was a point in which Martin Brundle was so frustrated in his response. I sort of got the back end of what you're just describing there, which is like, well, you're not going to be able to keep it on the track, so it doesn't make any sense. And I think David Croft's sort of doubling down, saying, "No, but well, you've already thrown the dice." Like, okay, well now, and then I just wanted to say it myself, like, okay, so just throw the car off the track too, and just be done with it. No, so. Shez, what you're talking about is at the core of my frustration with Ferrari for a better half of the last decade, and then even some, I mean, really, really for the last 2 decades, you could say. And the funny thing was, I was watching the race with the driver cams on, thanks to the F1 TV premium subscription that you can get now with multi-viewer, and I saw the exact
Touche.
moment that Charles and then Lewis, who was behind a couple cars behind him, past the pit lane at the exact moment that they could have pitted, and they would have I kid you not, they could have probably been in it for the win. They could have been, one of the two of them could have been in it for the win. Maybe not for the win, but they could have certainly had two cars on the podium. I think there was a virtual guarantee had they pitted at that time. And for the life of me, I do not understand why they do this over and over again. They do this every single time they've been given an opportunity to really win a race where they should have no business winning. Uh, and they just, oh my God, I just don't even, I mean, I really
Did
want to
you
strangle somebody on that
did
pit
you
wall,
did you
really.
did you miss
Oh my
the
goodness.
silent radio call as they were going past the pit lane
Oof.
entry where they said we are checking? I mean,
I mean,
by the time they had checked, it was probably a bit too late.
seriously, man, just call me for one of the races. Like, I'm an idiot and I could do a better job of, like, everyone knew. And why does this happen? We had this happen last year in Canada too. It's like, why do you guys do this? Supposedly Ferrari had gone with a wet setup for this race too. So what are you doing? You're doing the exact opposite. It's like just and you know what? Kudos to McLaren on the other hand. We just got done praising them. Like they've actually gotten on top of these issues. Now, look, I can understand that with Lewis, there would be some growing pains. They barely had, 3 full days of, being together and kind of doing this in any way that has any stakes attached to it. So I can understand that. But that should have been a call with Charles right away, and he wouldn't have spun. Charles spun consecutive and a couple minutes later, right on that same very lap where he could have pitted, and then they had to pit him. And then, oh my God, like it just, oh my God. And you know what? Just the best indictment was James Vowles at the end of the race in the post race. I think with Laura Winter in the post race show saying we had Carlos sitting there and he basically told us what Ferrari was going to do or not going to do. And that really helped Alex Albon in the end too, which was brilliant there too. So Carlos kind of getting one in from the beyond, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting listening to some of the radio exchanges between the McLaren pit wall and
Yeah.
Lando versus the same sort of um, conversation between Brian Botzi and Charles Leclerc, because what seemed to happen was McLaren were having an actual conversation about what we're going to do next. And there was a bit of a to and fro between the driver. Look, we think there's rain coming. Uh, what do you think
We don't
about
want to be
sticking
on
the,
the wrong
the
tire.
intermediates
Yeah.
on early?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I want to be on the right tire at the right time, but I don't want to throw away what we've got at the moment. And there was an exchange of thoughts at a period of time where it was safe to have that conversation, whereas Ferrari and Charles just had that. There's rain coming. It's going to be type
A
3
class two or
rain.
a class three.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And Charles like, oh, that sounds pretty bad. Yeah, it sounds pretty bad. And then suddenly they're in the middle of it, and rather than making the key calls
So,
like you
Shez,
said
who's
they should have made.
responsible for that? Who's responsible for this, Shez? Are
So
you
so so
really going
I
to
I
put it on
think
the
I
drivers?
think yeah. I mean, look, not. I think that it is a bit of a to and fro there, right? Because if it's to do with whether you're switching onto the mediums or the hards in a dry race, yeah, I think that comes down to the
Okay.
pit wall because they have all the information in front of them. But when it comes to what
Can
what
I?
what tire you need to have at a particular time, then if the driver and they didn't like the drivers didn't, at least I didn't hear it. If the drivers aren't saying we need to be on the inters or we need to be on the dries right now,
Okay.
it's a bit of a tricky one because the pit wall can't drive the car for them and they can't feel what's going on. So in that situation, I do think there's the driver has a
But
bit more responsibility. I'm not saying all of it, but some.
no, no, I agree with you, and I ask you this too. So, from what I heard in the Lando Norris and Will Joseph exchange was that there was a class two rain on the horizon. What we just talked about with Ferrari was a class three. Now, I'm pretty sure that a class three is worse than a class two. Is that correct?
I sure, yeah,
It's heavier rain,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So if you're gonna go to the driver, and I get it, you can put it on Charles, but fair enough. But it's always 50-50 in this. But you know this, you know that it's gonna be heavy rain. You know where you are sitting in the grid. It's a different thing for Lando, who's in the race lead, who's in the front, to say what he's saying. These are two different scenarios. And look, this should not happen at Ferrari. This is my frustration with it. You cannot blame the drivers there because the exact same thing happened with Lewis Hamilton. So there's something in the team that is missing in terms of their communication and their ability to make decisions and be firm with it too and say, okay, look, we see the data, we see the rain coming. And by the way, Shez, Ferrari had the benefit of seeing what was happening to the leaders ahead. That's not something Lando had. So sure, maybe the communication has to be a little bit more robust for Lando and the engineers because they have a lot to lose. But when you don't have that much to lose, how can you manage to lose?
Yeah, but they
I
can.
don't
Well,
understand that.
I
Like
mean,
you should,
they'd
or at
argue.
least split the strategies then, and then
Yeah,
but
yeah,
do something
but yeah,
different.
but
I mean,
they'll argue. Look, we were trying to hail Mary. My problem with this is that this is a recurring theme
correct.
for Ferrari in the same situation.
Same
McLaren had
situation.
these issues last season, and they seem to have learned from them. Okay, n equals one, and one race doesn't tell you everything about how this season is going to go. But from a strategy point of view, and that's one of the three main pillars, I think, of winning a championship. McLaren seem to have altered their processes from a strategy point of view to make the right calls in these crunch situations, which they weren't doing last season necessarily. Whereas Ferrari, I think 3 seasons on the trot now, when you've needed some inters, they've been on dries, and when they've needed dries, they've been on inters, and they keep making the same
And
mistake. And I'll be honest with you, it's not something that I made too much of a deal of, but now that there's
now you are.
exactly,
No, but
I'm
Chess,
not
this
even
has
going to lie
been my
about it.
life too. And I do not want to hold the drivers accountable for this, Chess, because this same egregious mistake happened in Monaco a couple of years ago where Charles could have won that race and lost it because they couldn't make up their damn mind and they put him on the wrong. And so the point of this is, Chess, it's not even about strategy, Chess. It is about communication. You need to have a little bit of back and forth and say, hey, look, we're thinking about doing this, or we might do this, or we might do that. We don't want to be on the wrong tire at the wrong time. Even just say that. I know it's the most obvious thing to say, but just say that so the drivers can know that instead of telling them, oh, there's water because there's water. Like, good God, like that. Oh my goodness, that would have been a funny joke had we made something out of this race. And now it has just become an indictment on how the communication happens, and it is pretty poor. It absolutely is poor. It shouldn't be poor, Shez. It and definitely not with Leclerc. It should not have been poor. I don't have a problem with them getting it wrong, Shez. I have a problem with them not applying some basic fundamental understanding. How is it that they're making these mistakes where none of the top teams are making those mistakes? It just shouldn't happen. It shouldn't
Yeah,
happen.
yeah. I mean, I think it comes down to what we said that at McLaren it was much more of a conversation. Even at Red Bull, there was a little bit of a to and
Yeah,
fro, wasn't it,
sure.
between
Yeah.
GP and Max about okay, if this happens, this is what we're going to do. I never heard that from Ferrari, and maybe it happened and we didn't hear it, but it didn't sound like it did. It sounds much more paternalistic from the pit wall at Ferrari, and that if you're not going to give your drivers a bit of license, I think you're gonna run into
And Shez,
some.
if the driver was making the calls and got it wrong, I would be more forgiving of them because they don't have access to everything, and they're always going to try to push to get the maximum results possible. But when you're sitting on the pit wall, you have so much access to everything else. You know what others are doing. There's no way on earth you can communicate everything that's happening to the driver in the moment. You know that, and so you have to be able to come on and say, "Hey, look, this is our opportunity." By the way, Ferrari had a great opportunity to gain something out of it. Like this would have been one of those weeks, but good God, they started this way. So I don't know. Maybe we can get it out of our system, but I have little belief in that happening. I have to hope for the next 23 races that there is it's either fully wet or fully dry. Like it cannot be one or the other. It just can't.
Indeed. Right. Next up, Max, mate. Doesn't really matter, does it? Come rain, come shine, Max is always there. Like
Oof.
he should not have stuck that car uh, on third on Saturday. He put up 2 purple sectors before he lost the rear end in the final sector. Maybe you could say he should have backed off a little bit in those first 2 sectors to save himself. But actually, I don't think it would have got him a
Mattered,
further
yeah.
position. So I think he's doing things with that car that, as usual, are beyond mere mortals, such as Liam Lawson, who managed to put it in the wall after starting 18th.
Hola, hola, Liam.
what was your verdict on the
Um,
Czechoslovakian of Liam Lawson?
I think I feel so bad for Liam because he's gonna get hate from both sides of it. No, the Checo side and candidly the Yuki side makes him look even worse. Give and Yuki, by the way, he ended up P11 or 12, whatever. It was not his mistake at all. He was actually going to be the Alex Albon of this race. He was destined to be maybe even a podium. Who could have said that? I mean, at one point he was P2 when Hamilton was leading. So not his fault completely. But look, I think Red Bull are in trouble, Shez. They definitely are. They got a bit of a break today by Oscar having his spin. And of course, Max was there, but I think the upshot of this is if the gap truly was what it was on Saturday, which is what, 4/10, a little bit more than that, maybe just almost a half a second, right? That's not good. And I don't know that Max can keep doing these things for 24 races to make
Well,
to
he
make
doesn't.
that
He
happen.
doesn't. You know, he doesn't need to. Like
Yeah.
ultimately, what this is going to come down to is there's going to be. I think the first 9 races, if I'm going to put my prediction hat on, is going to be Lando plus minus Oscar against Max. But unlike last season, where Max was able to build up a massive lead in their first 7 races where he had a car advantage, um, but the McLarens were somewhere near the back of the pack, Lando's not going to have that advantage. So even if he does rack up the wins up until Spain, where we could have a switch in terms of the competitive order, Lando making hay is still going to be Max right behind him, picking up the 18 points for second place, and every now and again a few fewer points for finishing third. But that, to me, unless Ferrari really up their game and Mercedes start to really pump in the times, it seems to be that's going to be the pattern. But after race 9, when the flexi wing rules come in for the front wings, you have to wonder if McLaren are going to be like, we wish we could have had more points in the first 9 races because Max is right there, and now Red Bull are back in it again
Well,
competitively.
do we know if the technical director is going to swing it a certain
Well, I
way or
don't know.
not?
I don't know, but there's always that risk, isn't
Mm.
there? Like last year when Miami sort of changed the dynamic of the technical battle. Is something similar going to happen in Spain with the flexi front wings? And if that's the case, and Lando and McLaren haven't built up enough of an advantage with the car they have right now, because Max is always sniping at their heels in a way that McLaren weren't the season before, then that they're not going to
Yeah.
be in the pound seats.
So I'd like to think as much as McLaren looked ominous this weekend, we should probably wait a couple more races to see exactly. I mean, this weekend was such an anomaly, even on Saturday itself with sort of the cooler conditions and everything. So maybe wait a couple more. I mean, we got China and then Japan coming up, right? And then back in the Middle East. So probably by race 3 or 4, maybe race 5, we should have a good sense. But Shez, if what you're saying is right, then McLaren actually have 3 more races than Red Bull did last year too. So I can see a world in which Lando could have built up a decent lead and then with fewer races to go than last year. So again, and then again, we're assuming that McLaren will just sort of fall off a cliff. I mean, you could be in a scenario in which, and I don't want to kind of get too ahead of it, that Lando may not need to win a whole lot of the races on the back end of those whatever 15 races are that are left. So
I, I
I don't know.
take
It
I.
doesn't look like
I
they'll be
take I take
uncompetitive.
your I take your point, Amar. But my argument here is that last year when Max was building up that lead, the McLarens were struggling to get points, let
Yeah.
alone finish on the podium. Whereas Max
So
is right there, so the sort of
yeah,
points differential is nowhere near as big as it would have been last
yeah,
season. Anyway,
I agree.
before we carry on with that, we probably need to have a quick chat about some of the rookies. Who was your rookie of the race, and who was your donkey rookie of the race, Amar?
Oh, I think the donkey rookie has to be Liam Lawson. No. All I mean, technically, he is a rookie. No, isn't he one of? So I'm assuming he is. Oof. Yeah, he has to be. I mean, look, you didn't expect this from him. And they got rid of Checo in the middle of after renewing his contract, and this could not have gone worse for him in terms. He was nowhere close on Saturday, and I mean, and then he spun on Sunday, and it's pretty much it. Like I don't. Can we argue that Checo would have done better? I suppose you could argue. I mean, at least he was better at coming back on a Sunday for the most part. I don't know. This is not what you wanted, no. Oof, gave up all that sponsorship money for. Now it's one race, right? Again, odd weekend, so maybe there's something there, but certainly there. Shez, my rookie star of this weekend is you know who, right? It's the guy who replaced the guy at Mercedes, right? And it's Kimi Antonelli. And look, he ended up in a fortuitous place as a result of, I think, Fernando Alonso, right? And then a bunch of different things. I know, and the rain too. But he looked pretty good racing George towards the end there. That I kind of wish we had a few more laps, no, for that to kind of play itself out. But he looked really good. He has raw speed and pace, and he's gonna get over some of his mistakes and sort of the rookie bug, if you will. And as long as he gets over that, that'd be fine. And I heard all this stuff about Gabriel Bortoleto on Saturday, kind of putting it ahead of all the rookies and blah blah blah. And then Sunday came, and then oof, that wasn't good for him either. Kind of spun out himself.
Yeah, but I think mate, Gabby Bortoleto is definitely somebody to watch, and it as usual follows my rookie rule. If you're a rookie F2 winner and certainly win back-to-back F3 and F2 titles, yeah, you probably know how to drive a car. And say what you want about Gabby sticking it in the wall on Sunday, he did out-qualify Nico Hülkenberg on the Saturday, which is no mean feat given what Hülkenberg's strengths are. I think it was a bit of a game of two halves for the rookies in terms of, I think Gabby probably took Saturday for me. That was really impressive, and I have to say he was always the rookie that I was most eager to watch, but he's just stuck in that silly Sauber. So like, how much of it are we actually going to see? Whereas Kimi's got an opportunity to do something big. Saturday wasn't really the best for him. Mercedes were very quick to come out and say, he damaged his bib on a curb, and that's what lost him the 0.3 that dropped him out of Q1. Very quick to defend him on that one, weren't they? But it's true, that had happened. So Kimi qualified, 18th, was it?
Something like that. Yeah.
But his drive in the wet was brilliant. I mean, he clearly has a control over his car in those conditions, and as you say, you'd expect that over the course of the season that he'll bring that to bear much more consistently in qualifying. But this isn't a season where he has to beat George. This is just a season where he needs to bed himself in and have those absolute peaks. And I think the race on Sunday was a peak for Kimi Antonelli. Really, really good to see that. Really good to see. I
was going to finish P4, right?
Yeah. If Alex Albon hadn't been there, but Alex.
But he got a 5-second penalty for an unsafe release.
Yeah,
that's what.
You're right. Yeah, I take that back.
It was not his fault, right?
So. His fault.
No, I think this is exciting, and I think with as many rookies on the grid, I think we'll have to wait a few races to see how this pans out in terms of. I mean, Isaac Hadjar got a bit unlucky too with his spin too. Like, there's just nothing you could do, and it's like, you kind of want to see, because Yuki did pretty well, but I mean, again, these rookies it's going to take some time, but they are all pretty exciting.
There we go. Right, so that's it. The Australian Grand Prix over for another season, and as the season starts to play out, I think we're already looking at Max Verstappen as the sole warrior going up against the might of the McLarens. Let's see how that one plays out over the next few races. As usual, please like, please subscribe. Please leave us a comment. We'll read every single one. We'll reply to as many as we possibly can. We will see you guys in the next one.
Fix it, Fred.